Hi, I'm Natalie Brooks, and this is the story of the night my own mother raised her glass, told me I was her gift by throwing me out, and how silence, not shouting, became my sharpest answer. The dining room in the big suburban Chicago house was always too warm. Tonight was no different. It was Mum's birthday, and the whole family was there, crammed around the long, polished table. Balloons bobbed uselessly in a corner, and a frosted cake sat waiting, its candles unlit. Everyone held champagne glasses, the cheap kind that always felt sticky. My sister, Sarah, was already a little tipsy, giggling at something my Uncle George had mumbled. My dad sat the head of the table, his face neutral, like it always was when things got uncomfortable. Mom stood up, her glass catching the light from the chandelier. She had that tight, bright smile she wore when she was about to say something cutting, something disguised as a joke. "To my birthday," she announced, her voice a little too loud. "And to my greatest gift this year." Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me, where in the world are you watching from? I love seeing how far this story travels. Everyone looked expectant, waiting for her to say something about Dad's predictable gold bracelet or Sarah's expensive perfume. But Mum's eyes were fixed on me. "My gift?" she continued, her smile widening, a cruel edge to it. Natalie finally gone. A wave of laughter washed over the table. Sarah snorted, covering her mouth but her eyes gleaming with amusement. Uncle George chuckled, nodding like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all year. Dad cleared his throat, his gaze dropping to his plate. I sat there, frozen. The clinking of their glasses, the forced merriment in their voices, it all felt like knives twisting inside me. My face felt hot, and my hands clenched under the table. The pain was a familiar ache, but tonight it felt sharper, more final. They had said it out loud. They were celebrating me not being there. A part of me wanted to scream, to shatter their happy little bubble. But another part, a quieter, more tired part, just felt numb. I managed a faint smile, the kind you plaster on when you're trying not to cry in public. I didn't say a word. That toast, as brutal as it was, wasn't some shucking, out-of-the-blue attack. It was just the loudest confirmation of how they had always seen me, how they had always made me feel. Like I was an inconvenience, a disappointment, someone to be tolerated until they finally went away. I remembered wanting to study music in college. It was the only thing that truly made me feel alive, the only thing I was genuinely good at. I had saved up some money from part-time jobs, enough to cover a small portion of the tuition. But when I brought it up at dinner, Mum's face tightened. "Music," she scoffed, picking at her salad. "What a waste of good tuition money. You need something practical, Natalie, something that will actually get you a job." Sarah, who breezed through a business degree and landed a comfortable corporate job thanks to Dad's connections, chimed in, "Yeah, Natalie, you can't exactly make a living playing the flute." They both laughed, and Dad just nodded in agreement, as usual. My dreams, my passion, dismissed with a few careless words. Later, when I lost my job during a company downsizing, I turned to them, hoping for some support, maybe just a little understanding. Instead, they focused on my brother, Michael. He had this grand idea for a tech startup, and suddenly, the bank of Mom and Dad was wide open. They poured money into his venture, talking about his potential and his bright future. When I tentatively asked for a small loan to tide me over until I found something new, Mum's voice turned cold. "Natalie, you need to be more responsible. We can't just keep bailing you out. Michael is building something important." She actually called me a parasite under her breath as she walked away. For years, I had tried so hard to gain their approval, their love. I showed up for every holiday, meticulously chose birthday gifts, offered to help with chores, always hoping that if I just tried harder, if I was just better, they would finally see me. But every attempt felt like pushing against a locked door. My efforts were either mocked, dismissed, or simply ignored. I'd bake Mum her favorite cake for her last birthday, and she barely touched it, complaining that it was too rich. I spent hours helping Dad fix his computer, only for him to later tell Uncle George that Sarah was the smart one in the family. It was a constant drip, drip, drip of rejection, wearing me down bit by bit. Each instance chipped away at my self-worth, leaving the feeling like I was fundamentally flawed, unlovable. And I started to believe it. But that night, with the champagne still fizzing in their glasses and their laughter echoing in my ears, something shifted. Mum's words, so casually cruel, hung in the air. My gift? You gone. It wasn't just a dismissal, it was a celebration of my absence. Their eyes were all on me, waiting for the tears, the argument, the dramatic outburst they probably expected. I could feel my face burning, my throat tight. I remember the sharp sting as I bit down on my lip, so hard I tasted blood. But I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I wouldn't let them see the hurt that ripped through me. Instead, I took a slow, deep breath. I stood up, my movements deliberate, calm. "Excuse me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I walked to the coat rack by the door, slipped on my jacket, and picked up my small purse. I didn't look back at their stunned faces. I didn't slam the door. I simply walked out. The cold Chicago air hit me like a shock as I stepped onto the porch. I pulled out my phone and called for an Uber. As the car pulled away from their perfectly manicured lawn, the lights of their house shrinking in the rearview mirror, a strange sense of relief washed over me, mixed with the deep, familiar ache. In the silent Uber ride home, the city lights blurring past the window, I whispered to myself, the words barely audible, "If I'm gone, then I'll truly be gone." For years, while they were busy investing in Michael's fleeting business ventures and praising Sarah's predictable career, I had been quietly building my own foundation. No grand announcements, no requests for loans, just consistent, determined work. I had always loved music, even if they hadn't. After my regular 9-to-5 job, I spent my evenings and weekends teaching piano and guitar lessons to kids in the neighborhood. Word spread, and soon I had a steady stream of students. I also had a knack for writing catchy little tunes, and I started freelancing, creating jingles for local commercials and online ads. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was mine. And most importantly, I saved almost every penny I earned from these side gigs. While they assumed I was struggling, just scraping by, I had a growing fund tucked away in a separate account, one they knew nothing about. It was my secret, my safety net, my little act of rebellion against the constant narrative of my inadequacy. Just a few weeks before Mom's birthday dinner, I had been approached by a small non-profit organization that ran after-school programs for underprivileged kids in the city. They were looking for someone to help them start a music program, someone who could perhaps even sponsor some instruments and lessons. At the time, I had politely told them I would think about it, but sitting in that Uber, the echo of Mom's toast still ringing in my ears, my answer became crystal clear. The very next morning, I walked into my bank and wired $40,000 to the nonprofit. It was a significant chunk of my savings, but as the transaction went through, a feeling of pure, unadulterated joy bloomed in my chest. This money, which they didn't even know I had, was going towards something meaningful, something that would bring music into the lives of kids who deserved it. It gave me more satisfaction than any fleeting moment of approval I had ever craved from my family. I didn't send a dramatic email explaining my decision. I didn't write a scathing letter detailing years of hurt. I didn't call them, screaming and crying. I simply acted. I blocked all their phone numbers. I packed up my small apartment, the silence feeling strangely liberating. I found a new place across town, a small, sunny studio with a window overlooking a park. I didn't tell them my new address. To them, I had simply vanished. The gift Mum had toasted had been fully unwrapped. But in a small community center downtown, the real story was unfolding. The $40,000 I had donated was used to buy new instruments, bright, shiny guitars, keyboards, and a set of drums that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. They hired a part-time music teacher, and the after-school program started to fill with eager, smiling faces. The first time I visited the center, the empty rehearsal hall echoed with the tentative sounds of children learning their first chords. A group of them were clustered around a piano, their small fingers fumbling on the keys. I sat quietly in the back, watching them, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. This was where I belonged. These were the people who appreciated what I had to offer, not for what they could gain, but for the joy of the music itself. My sudden silence and disappearance rattled them more than any argument ever could. Their carefully constructed world, where they knew exactly where everyone stood, or, in my case, felt they did, had been disrupted. A few days after I moved, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Where are you? Mom says you're being dramatic. Call us." There was no concern. No, "Are you okay?" Just annoyance at the inconvenience I had caused. I deleted the message without replying. Then came the voicemails from Dad. He started off pretending nothing had happened, his tone light and casual. "Hey, Natalie, it's Dad. Just checking in. Come home for Sunday dinner, okay? Your mother made her famous pot roast." As the days turned into weeks and my silence persisted, his messages became more strained, tinged with a hint of panic. "Natalie, this isn't like you. Please, just call. Let us know you're all right." Mum's message, when it finally came, was cold and laced with her usual passive aggression. "If you want to be petty and play games, Natalie, don't expect us to chase you. We have our own lives." But they were chasing me in their own way. Their calls and texts, though often laced with anger or denial, were a testament to the fact that my absence had created a void they hadn't anticipated. Silence, I was discovering, was a powerful weapon. It made them restless, forcing them to confront the fact that I wasn't the powerless doormat they had always assumed I was. My words had always been easily dismissed, but my silence was a brick wall they couldn't climb over. Weeks turned into months. I settled into my new routine, spending my days working and my evenings at the community center, surrounded by the enthusiastic chatter of the kids and the joyful noise of their music. My family remained a distant, muted presence in the background. Then, out of the blue, I received a call from my cousin, Emily. We had never been particularly close, but she was always a bit of an observer, a collector of family gossip. "Hey, Natalie," she said, her voice unusually hesitant. "Everything okay with you? I haven't heard from you in ages." "I'm fine, Emily." "Busy," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. There was a pause, and then she blurted out, "So, everyone's a little confused. They thought you were struggling financially. But then someone mentioned something about a rather large donation to a youth center downtown. Tens of thousands of dollars? Is that true?" I smiled to myself, picturing their bewildered faces. The narrative they had so carefully constructed, Natalie, the dependent failure, was crumbling. "Don't believe everything you hear, Emily," I said smoothly, and quickly changed the subject. But the seed of doubt had been planted. They realized I wasn't broke, wasn't desperate, and most importantly, wasn't theirs to control anymore. The silence had forced them to reevaluate their assumptions about me, and the whispers about the donation only amplified their confusion. Suddenly, invitations started appearing in my mailbox again. Sarah's engagement party, a cousin's graduation, even Dad's retirement dinner, a milestone I hadn't even known was approaching. Each invitation was glossy and expensive, a stark contrast to the simple life I was now living. And each one came with a carefully worded note, tucked inside the elegant envelope. "Family first, Natalie. Don't be difficult. We miss you, even if things have been strained. It would mean a lot to your father if you were there." I read each note with a detached curiosity, as if they were messages from strangers. There was no tug of obligation, no flicker of guilt. The years of being made to feel like an outsider had finally severed those emotional ties. I declined every single invitation. Instead of attending Sarah's engagement party, I spent the evening at the community center, helping the kids choose songs for their first recital. Instead of celebrating my cousin's graduation, I listened to a shy little girl finally master a difficult chord on her guitar. And on the night of Dad's retirement dinner, I sat in the small music room, surrounded by the joyful sounds of my students practicing, the laughter echoing in the space my family had once hollowed out with their indifference. The night of the first recital arrived, buzzing with nervous excitement. The small auditorium was packed with proud parents, their faces beaming as their children took the stage. There were a few stumbles, some missed notes, but the air was thick with joy and accomplishment. I sat quietly in the back, watching them, tears welling up in my eyes. These weren't my children, not in the traditional sense, but they felt like my family. They valued my guidance, my passion, not for what I could give them materially, but for the gift of music I could share. Their small victories were my victories. Their smiles were my reward. As the final notes of the last song faded into applause, a profound sense of peace settled over me. The years of striving for my family's approval, the constant feeling of being unwanted, it all seemed so distant now, like a faded nightmare. I whispered to myself, the words barely audible above the cheering, that toast wasn't the end. It was my beginning. My family thought my silence was a sign of weakness, a sulky retreat. But it wasn't. It was the sound of me building a new life, a life where I was valued and appreciated. It was the quiet strength of choosing my own path. They toasted me gun, and I chose to stay gun. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't shouting back or seeking their approval. Sometimes, the best revenge is building your own joy in a place they'll never touch. If you've ever felt underestimated, pushed aside, or cut out by the people who were supposed to love you, hit like, subscribe, and share this story. Because walking away doesn't always mean losing. Sometimes, it means finally winning.